Lawson Naidu. Now, Business Day reporting today that there was a strong bounce back in employment with the easing of the lockdown in the last quarter of last year, with 2.1 million people finding work again after the loss of 2.8 million jobs recorded in July that same year. This is the key, the top-line finding of the NIDS CRAM survey. It's an important social survey of the effect of the pandemic and the lockdown on a sample of about 6,000 individuals, conducted by 30 academics at several universities. The overall coordinator of the survey is the University of Stellenbosch's research fellow Nic Spaull, who joins me now on Thursday lunchtime. A remarkable bounce back, Nick, in employment, as I've mentioned. Were these new jobs or simply people returning to jobs? And I'll add a third dynamic to that. Are these jobs sustainable?
Sure. So on your first question of whether these are new jobs, we know that only half of those who lost their jobs during the lockdown, so between February and April, had regained their employment by October. So a third of people who were unemployed in February before the pandemic were now employed in October. So there's a lot of churn that's going on. It's not just job losers who are regaining employment. Many of these jobs are actually going to people that were unemployed before the pandemic. On the question of whether the jobs are sustainable, that's anyone's guess. I think we're waiting to see that. We have subsequent waves of our survey that will be released in April and July this year. But I think what we are seeing is just an incredible amount of churning in the labour market.
Are they making more or less money, those that are back in the workforce?
So the average earnings for those that were in employment in October is not different to February. So we looked into that. We tried to, there's a paper by Ihsan Basir and his co-authors from UCT that looked at this exact topic of whether earnings were lower. Are people working fewer hours? Are they getting paid less? And what they found was that we are working very similar hours in October compared to February, and that earnings levels are similar compared to February, if not even higher in certain sectors.
Nick, let's break away from the data. You also have a disturbing finding from the results saying that our mental health, all of us, yours, mine, seems to be deteriorating.
Yes, so we asked all of the respondents 2 questions about their mental health. These are 2 questions that are linked to indicators of depression in research. And what we found was that between July and November, there was an increase from 24% to 29% of the population that was screening positive for depressive symptoms. So obviously depression itself is a clinical diagnosis, so we can't say that these people are depressed. But they are screening positive for depressive symptoms. We also see that those people that are experiencing hunger, and particularly experiencing hunger every day of the week, had the highest rates of reported screening positive for depressive symptoms, with 67% of them screening positive for depressive symptoms.
The survey goes on to say, and it's very extensive, we can only look at some of the top-line stuff here, but the most startling finding, child hunger has also worsened, now at its highest level, if I'm not mistaken, in a decade. What I don't understand is if people are going back to work, as you've suggested, why is child hunger deteriorating or increasing?
So this is one of the conundrums of the findings, and it's not what we expected, but it is what the data is showing. So typically we would expect that when people go back to work, that things like hunger and mental health would improve, but that's not what we found. What we see is that child hunger, or reported child hunger, went up from 12% in July to 16% in November. And that's based on the question that we asked households if they have children in them. Did any child in this household go hungry in the past 7 days because there wasn't enough food? So the fact that 1 in 6 respondents that had a child in that household answered yes to that question is really a startling finding. And as you say, that is the highest that we've seen in a decade. It's actually such a severe form of hunger that we don't ask it in household surveys. Normally we would say, in the last year, has anyone gone hungry? So the fact that we asked in the last week and that number is so much higher than the historical average is really startling. On your question of why there's been an increase despite the jobs bounce back or the partial jobs bounce back, I think there aren't smoking guns. So there's not an obvious explanation for it. I think 2 that are relevant. The one is the fact that children are still not getting the free school meals every day that they did before the lockdown. So even though the rate of free school meals has increased between July and November, it's still not at its pre-pandemic level. And also we have rotational schooling now. So only 50% of children are actually attending school on any given day in order to comply with COVID regulations of social distancing. And because of that, they're only getting a meal every second day. And we also had the removal of the child support grant top-ups in November when the 440 Rand grant was topped up by 500 Rand per caregiver up until October. That was removed from November onwards, and our survey was looking at November and December.
Nic Spaull, I'm going to thank you for joining us from the University of Stellenbosch, research fellow, and he pulls together that very important NIDS cram survey. We're into the third wave now.